Good morning. This is the BLAINESWORLD webcast that you can find each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen in on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You get more information and find out about past shows at my website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country who are doing what I think are interesting things. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Vally Sharpe, owner and creative director of United Writers Press, for being my guest today. And Vally, you can wave to all your friends and friends who are watching this.
Hi, pleasure to be here, Blaine.
Okay, well, it's my pleasure. And I have to mention that Vally Sharpe is a freelance book shepherd, and we'll talk about what that is. I love that title, who works with individuals who want to self-publish. In operation for 20 years, she has worked on over 750 book projects nationwide, ranging from family memoirs to novels to historical reference books. And so I have to ask you, Vally, as a child, you grew up where?
In South Georgia.
Okay, and as a child growing up in South Georgia, did you always know you wanted to be in the book publishing industry?
No, no. Although I've always been a bit of a writer, no matter what part of my career I was in. I'm actually a psychologist by training and practiced for about 15 years. And I went into an area that you're familiar with, and that's marketing, which is where I picked up some of the technical skills. And then my original major was math and computer science, but that was back in the day when computers took up city blocks and you had dumb
Right.
terminals and that sort of thing. And I couldn't imagine sitting in a room drawing boxes around screens all day long. So that was when I switched over to psychology. But I've done software development and a number of things. But all along, I wrote the psychological reports. So, like a lot of publishers, particularly on the editorial side, I started out as a writer, and I would love to write and continue to write, except that I don't have time these days.
So you actually wrote articles or books or had self-published?
Usually essays. The start, and I'll show the cover a little bit later when we talk about some of the book projects that we're on. It was around the time of September 11th. I had sold one business and was trying to start up another. And somebody said, "Well, why don't you publish that, those stories you used to write?" And they were back from the psychological days. And I thought, well, why not? So I put together a book of 26 stories told from the point of view of a Siamese cat. And I thought, I don't know that I'm going to go the agent route. I mean, self-publishing was fairly new at that point. I'm not going to go the agent route because I can't imagine trying to sell a book by a cat into Simon and Schuster. So having the graphic design skills that I picked up back in my marketing days, in the early marketing days, I decided to self-publish. And as it turned out, it was back in the day where you had to buy a certain quantity, and you were figuring out how to distribute them and sell them and do all the rest of that. And I accidentally ended up being the president of the Georgia Writers Association. I lived in Atlanta at the time. And what I discovered as a part of that group of people is that there was um, I can say never the twain shall meet. There is the writing side, the art side of books, and there's the business side of books. And most of the people who wanted to publish books had no idea about business and vice versa. And so I started a company to kind of bridge the gap so that I've had a foot in each of those camps. And it's taking the book and taking it all the way through into the business arena.
Actually, jump in here, Vally. You raised a good point about how self-publishing used to be, and it used to have a kind of like this very, very negative, image to people. And I remember
Right.
too, I used to work from a marketing standpoint with a couple of authors, and they'd have to buy 500 copies of the book. They'd have to
Mm-hmm.
store them in their garage. They'd sell 3 copies, and it was almost a disaster.
Right.
And so what's been incredible to me, and you're helping with it, of course, as well, is the whole industry seems to have changed in that now you can self-publish and you don't have to buy 500 books. You don't have to buy, you can buy one copy of a book or no copies, and
Right.
really change things around so that I even tell people, Valley, I don't know about you, but I even tell people rather than try to get an agent and do a major house and money there is not a lot of money, you're oftentimes, and do you find this better off self-publishing? Some folks?
It depends on the project, and I'll tell you about one. Uh, One of the good things about self-publishing now, as opposed to back in the day, is that you couldn't get it in Barnes and Noble.
Right.
You couldn't get a book into a bookstore because you couldn't get a relationship with Ingram Publishing, um, unless you were printed in ink, and there was the big onus of what's called returnable books, and that's still true even in the book publishing business. If you The way that book publishing and book selling interact is that a bookstore, like even an indie bookstore, looks on their computer at Ingram Publishing to see if your book is in the database, and they'll order it. And that's been true since 1970 when Ingram took over. And the whole model works on you order, you're a bookstore owner, you order 30 books, you put them on your shelf. And if in 3 weeks you haven't sold any, you return what is not there, because there's not a lot of real estate, not a lot of,
Right.
with thousands of books that are not there. So you return them. And self-publishing, the idea was I go into the bookstore, I sell them 10 copies, they write me a check, and that's not the way it works. And so a lot of it is it returnable? I mean, in those early days, and truthfully, there were a lot of people who did self-publish, who didn't understand things like how to put the page numbers on opposite sides. I mean, the technical ends, and so there were some elitists, particularly early on. But when Amazon first began to do Create Space, there were a couple of others that were doing it. There were printing books. You could send them a cover file, and you could send them an interior file, and they would print it out so that you could have your book and down at a cost that you didn't have to buy 1,000 or 500 in order to get the cost per book down where you have a chance of selling them. And I remember thinking at the time, they're gonna, this is gonna change. When the digital publishing end with the toner and the ability to produce a file quickly, to print one book and get it out there quickly came along, I knew that people were going to jump on that wagon, and eventually everybody, and as we were talking before, from Zondervan to Simon and Schuster and Random House all have investment in self-publishing outfits. And finally, Ingram Publishing itself purchased basically a printing facility or two and became Ingram Spark, a division of it. They were kind of the longest to go, but they didn't get the vision quite early enough. And so a lot has changed so that today I say, yeah, self-publish.
Well, let me ask you a question in terms of today or moving forward. Do you have some authors who have self-published and actually do better without even having to use a bookstore? In other words, do you have any folks who choose not to go the bookstore route and just publish a book on their own and sell it? Can that be done?
Yeah, absolutely. That will work better for nonfiction
Right.
than it will for fiction. And that's because there's more of a niche market. For instance, if you write a great book about gardening, sell it at a nursery.
Right.
Because as you know, the idea of marketing is who's going to read the book, who's going to be interested in the book, and where do they shop? Okay. Yeah, I mean, sure, you can go on Amazon and do that sort of thing, but if you understand who your market is, who your audience is, you can go around to book clubs, sell it at craft fairs, and I've had several people that have done very well. Eventually, they go to Amazon or somewhere else, but That's more because they're tired of putting books in boxes and shipping them and doing that sort of thing.
And by the way, well taken. Yeah, because that's another thing that I hate, and I think a lot of people hate, having to take one book at a time and to sell it, So it's a lot easier. I guess that's where they go the Amazon route to do it. But even with self-publishing, and you helped me with this recently too, it's possible you can also get at a very reduced price 50 books yourself or 100 books yourself, and then sell them at the garden clubs or wherever you want to sell them.
Exactly.
It's not a difficult process. But for the benefit of folks who are listening, Vally, why don't we just kind of go through the process? I'll use, if I will, almost myself as an example, that somebody writes a book and they want to get it printed, and they could do it themselves, but it's, at least for me, it wasn't that easy. You can do it and spend a lot of time on it, but somehow through a mutual friend, I found you. I'm very grateful I did, because boy, you do the whole thing soup to nuts and makes it a lot easier for somebody. And I think at a very reasonable price. Explain what happens. So somebody's written a book, and at that point in time, should they contact you or before they finish the book? What happens?
I've had some people call before just to kind of get an idea of what comes next. But most of the time, people have a manuscript that they think is close to wanting to publish. They might have an idea for a cover. What I have, and I have this on my website, is send me an email, set up a phone conversation, because I want to talk to you for about 30 minutes to understand what the project is. Because the very first question is a business question. What do you want to do with it?
Right, right.
And once I have an idea of where they want to sell their book, if they want to sell their book, because sometimes I'll do family memoirs and they're only going to print 50 copies and give them away. And it'll run the gamut from there to people who really want to take a shot at nationwide sales, which is more often on the fiction side. And by the way, I've had a couple of books in the past that have actually made it, even with the self-publishing, to be picked up by a traditional publisher and taken through channels and all the rest of it as well. That's another way in which the whole self-publishing world has ended. But back to your question, once I've got that, I'm going to ask for the manuscript to be sent to me, emailed to me, because usually it's in Word. Although I have had a few send me printed manuscripts that I have to scan in and
Right.
copy edit and do that sort of thing to get it into an electronic form. And what I do is quote a project price. The first thing I'm going to do is look to see, does it need a copy edit? Okay. And we'll go through an editorial process. I do some developmental editing for first novelists, because fiction and nonfiction are kind of different animals. But once I understand what editing I may need to do, then I provide a quote, and it includes the design of the interior and a cover file that Amazon and Ingram Spark and even traditional book manufacturers will need in order to create your book. But I know which side of the page things should be on. I know I use the Adobe Creative Suite to do all of the images, and I've been around now long enough to know what makes for a good book, but also what makes it easier for the printers that are producing the books.
By the way, Vally,
And
let me jump in here for a second. Mention first of all that I've used your services, been very pleased with your services, but also if folks are even listening and they want to get in touch with you. And by the way, what you mentioned was so helpful to me, that introductory discussion. It's like, again, I'll give you a compliment. I had looked at a couple other sources, and there was no person-to-person contact. You just send an email, and then they'd have one email back and forth. And I had lots of questions, and you answered all the questions. So how did somebody reach you initially for that consultation?
they can go to my website, which is uwpnew.com, uwpnew.com. The UWP stands for United Writers Press, and it's new because I used to have the whole names strung out, and it's kind of hard to get there. Or you can call me here in Asheville at 828-505-1037.
Okay, naturally, I'll ask you to repeat that again, the phone number.
828-505-1037.
And a strong recommendation, if anybody's interested in this as we discuss it, give Vally a call or send her an email or go on the website to at least get you thinking in the right direction, whether you use her or not. But that initial call was so helpful to me. So they call you, somebody has an idea for a project, they give you a call. What then happens?
Well, assuming that they are ready to go to print, they send me an email, hopefully with the Word file of the inside. And I take a look at it, and then I will give them a quote for how much it will cost to have a print ready cover file, to have the interior laid out exactly as needed. That first question that I asked about where you want to go, that already tells me that I'm going to have to think about what the spine width's going to need to be on Amazon versus, who are we going to print with? How many are we going to print? Are we going to print any at all? Do they want an EPUB or an ebook, which is a Kindle edition or something like that? And I usually give a project price, a total price for everything that I understand that they want. By the way, the 30-minute conversation is free, always.
On that initial call or after you speak to a person, do you ever make a decision or the person make a decision with you that maybe they shouldn't publish the book? Does that ever happen?
I've probably had a few inquiries where they weren't quite there. And after they, of course, everybody wants to be a New York Times bestseller. After they realize the business side of it and the chances and whether or not they're going to have to make a decision about whether they're going to be boxing and shipping and keeping up with this and taking the money and doing all the things that are there, they'll sometimes say, I don't think I'm quite up to that, and walk away. But I haven't had many, because usually I'm looking at what's your budget, what's your plan. If this is just a bucket list thing, I can do it very quickly. And there's a difference. Here's where the difference is between me and, like I said, the Zondervan, and there are, the whole industry has exploded with people who are saying, yeah, we'll publish your book and we'll do this and editing, and they list all the rest of that. And it really comes back to what you said. I do virtually all the work. Sometimes I send it out for proofreading after I've been involved, but I'm doing it. I'm thinking about it. I'm editing it. I'm designing it according to what people have said. And you can email me and ask me a question. You can pick up the phone and call me. You don't know what an ISBN is? I do. Call me. I mean, I'm available to do it. And the other thing is, most of those, and I understand that, also handle distribution of the book, but they're taking a piece of it. And the difference for me is I'm a third-party vendor. I'm technically a publisher, and I can supply the ISBN number, and I will act as the publisher as far as that's concerned. But because you pay me, I don't participate in the proceeds of any sales that you get if you're out there selling it.
One of the things I also liked about working with you, Vally, is you kind of exemplify what I talk about marketing should be all about. And it's not necessarily high tech, but it's high touch,
Mhm.
And the beauty of working with you was that, yeah, unlike, like I think I told you, I looked on the webs on the internet and found some other people do similar kinds of things that you do, but there was no contact with them. There was no, I'd have to send an email, and sometimes, Vally, they'd say they'd respond to one email. They'll take the questions once and that was it. And I perhaps drove you crazy, but you had more than one email from me, and to your credit, I don't know if I think I asked you there to set the record, but boy, was I impressed. And talk a little bit about that, how you turn around responses. I would ask you a question, and then sometimes I get a response within 30 seconds. I just couldn't believe it. Like, what do you stay at the computer all day and just wait for people like me to send you questions?
Well, one of the things about me from a personality standpoint is that I have 10 projects at least going at one time. I've got my finger in something. I may be doing a cover design for one. And by the way, I don't just do projects. On occasion, I'll just do the cover, or I'll just do copy editing, or I'll do a bit or piece, kind of an a la carte thing, and I have done for about 10 years with other publishers who say, hey, can you fix this cover? Can you do that sort of thing? Point being that I'm sitting here at my computer, and because I hate it when people don't respond to me quickly, I'm going to, if I see it, if I happen to check email and I see it, and it's a simple question, I'm going to respond to you. Sometimes it may be a day or two, but I'm going to let you know. But it's because, and again, the marketing background is there. I want my customers to be delighted and comfortable that they're in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. And I don't know how. I keep saying, okay, I'm gonna respond to those emails from 8 to 10 in the morning, and it doesn't work for me because I
Talk if
want to
you
move quickly.
talk if you would, Valley, how long the process takes. In other words, and we can use me or other people as an example, but we contact you, have that 30-minute consultation. We come to an agreement that you'll handle this project for me. How long does it then take for me to reach that point to the conclusion, typically?
What I generally say, and we need to set editing aside because that can take,
Right.
a good bit of time. But if you're really talking about doing the layout for a book, and getting the cover design and ready to go, 60 days is generally what I say. Usually it comes in sooner than that. It depends on how many changes get made along the way toward the end. And we're laughing, with you. We could have been to Amazon a lot faster. But usually within 60 days, and most of the time in less time, unless it's a very complicated project that has, 1,000 footnotes. And because there are a lot of extra things that have to be done, or a lot of images that have to be worked on, and that can take a little bit longer. But um, editing is a different story because sometimes it takes a little less, and sometimes it takes almost a rewrite before.
What I especially appreciate with you too is how you kind of guide me through the process, and that I wanted the books for a certain date. I had a reason I wanted a certain date, and you backed me up on it, which is great. I thought I'd have all sorts of time, but you were very realistic. And again, I want to thank you for the fact that we got it done and the book in my hands earlier than I had hoped for, but that was great news.
Yes,
Normally,
absolutely.
I guess that's part of the process. You'd rather err on that side so that I have it in my hands, which was great. Now, as we're talking, I think it might be helpful. Could you maybe kind of show and talk about some of the projects you've worked with? I think you have a bunch of them. You can pop up on the screen here.
I can.
Okay. And just as Vally's setting that up, I want to mention that we're speaking with Vally Sharpe, and she has her own publishing company where she helps people publish their own stuff. Wait, I know that book. We'll come back to it at the very end.
We'll get there.
Okay. I love it. Now, is this the very first one?
This is the very first one, and this is the book that I was talking about, the 26 stories
Oh,
by
okay.
Siamese Cat.
Yeah.
This is what got me into the business in the first place. Back in the initial paperback was published in 2002. In 2004, this was actually the cover of a hardback book that was sold as a gift book, and did quite well. I still have a couple of boxes. I think I printed 1,000 of them. So I have experienced most of what I'm talking about in terms of having to buy, having to store, figuring out how to distribute and do the rest of that. But the next book that I
Wait,
spent,
Ellie, let me just jump in though and mention one thing that folks may not realize is what Vally just said. So the beauty of it, you can order 50 books, 100 books, how many you want to keep in your basement, but also if you order them through Amazon, and then have Amazon ship them through Amazon Prime. If you have the membership, you don't pay anything for shipping, which is incredible, you know. So that was just like a tremendous savings to me that I don't have to, because I used to have to pay $4 or $5 to send out a book. And now I send that, I love it. I send that for free. So that's another big advantage to self-publishing through, you know, and you can help them with, you help me with. So I'm
Right.
sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to say the way that Amazon works is you don't, once you pay me to get everything ready and we get it uploaded to Amazon KDP, it stands for Kindle Direct Platform. And it existed from back in the days when Amazon really only did the ebooks that you read on your Kindle, and they kept the name. It's confusing, I know. But the good thing about the way Amazon works is that once you've uploaded the file, they will print them, and you can order author copies that are much less expensive than they would have been 20 years ago. Used to be in traditional book publishing, authors got a certain number of copies, and usually they paid something like 60% of the retail price. But now what happens is you've got the price that you can order as the author. It's much less. I mean, it's just a little bit over their cost of printing. Amazon, what I call Big Amazon, which is the bookseller,
Right.
takes 40% of the retail price, and basically they add the print cost to that 40%, whatever you set, subtract it from the retail price. And when somebody buys the book on Amazon, including yourself, if you go through regular Amazon, the royalty that gets deposited into your account is a result of that. The retail price minus the cost of printing minus that 40% that they take. And there are some others that work pretty well. But
Okay, I'm
back to
sorry.
here, this is
The first book.
the first book that got me involved from being a marketing director and a management consultant at that particular time. The
Now,
next,
was that your cat too?
it was.
Okay.
Yeah, these were stories that about a cat that actually happened, and I'll tell you, for example, the first, and the connection to my psychology will be clear. The first story was him talking about discovering that he was adopted and how he was he was at the Regal pet shop. And so the story is from his point of view about discovering that he was the last one in the pet shop before, he was picked up by his human. And there are other stories that this cat was pretty funny. Um, uh, for example, he went to work with the neighbor, and I did not know because he was so curious that he jumped up in the back of her truck. And it was 6 months later that she came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Simon's mom." And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I have to tell you that I took him to work with me one day." And she had and did not know it. He crawled into the back of the truck, and then at lunch, she discovered him and she brought him home and let him out. And I never knew that anything happened because he was an outdoor cat. But this book also goes, the psychology part goes to a moral, if you will, in that he tells a story about discovering that there was a big wide world outside of the neighborhood, and learning about that. But anyway, as an aside, that this is again the book that I was out selling when I ended up becoming the president of the Georgia Writers Association back then.
Okay, so
The
let's
next
go.
one
Yeah.
is called Simon Says Views from a Higher Perspective. It is not available on, in hard copy, but I did create an ebook of it, and it is available if you're interested in reading it on Amazon.
Okay, let's go through some of
Then,
those quickly. Yeah,
yeah, this if you're familiar with Greenville, South
sure.
Carolina's Main Street and how it came about, Mice on Main is a book about finding the bronze mice that are along. And it has become extremely popular, and the Greenville folks really love it. We published this in 2007, and and it has now passed over 50,000 copies sold.
Really? Wow. Very good.
Right, and that's a regional thing that was not sold on Amazon or through Barnes and Noble. There's a good story about that, but we'll save it for another day.
Okay.
Here is Pete the Cat. I love my white shoes. This is the one that I was talking about a few minutes ago that was picked up by HarperCollins, actually. You can tell how long ago it was because it included a music CD because there's a song that's part of that. This became so popular that it took off. HarperCollins got it. The last I heard, there was an Amazon cartoon based on Pete the Cat. And there have been quite a few, and something like 15 million have sold worldwide. But I was there with the first book and the incubation of it.
Very exciting.
This is a book that I also did in 2007. It sold out within the first weekend. I did not know how many World War II aviation people there were around, but these were interviews and articles about men who were either crewmen or pilots for the 352nd Fighter Squadron, who were called the Blue-Nosed Bastards of Bodney, England. They flew the P-51s, and these just, the last time I looked, one of the hardcover copies was selling for $400 on eBay. We
Now,
only
by the
had,
way, by the
yeah,
way, on this book and the others are going to be shown, are most of these available on Amazon as well?
some are, some are
Okay.
not. This one only by used because, it was kind of a private thing that we did for the 352nd Association back in those days, but we sold out and did a paperback version, but the main author died at the age of 96 in 2016, and so we haven't continued with it.
Okay,
But
cool.
let me see. Let me go back. Pete the Cat, definitely. Mice on Main is available on Amazon, but it's also available through Barnes and Noble locally, and we can talk about that at some point later. This book I can't remember. I think it's probably available on. These are just a couple of novels that I've worked with. I like this one in particular because of the very simple design. Here's a 3-series book in which we did the covers and the interior design. Here's a 4 in a series. Here's a poetry book that was actually pretty recent, within 2024. Here's a history book about Francis Marion. Stephen Smith is a archaeology professor at the University of South Carolina. Here's another that's in process. This is I'd never heard of the Society of the Cincinnati, but this is one of those that has lots and lots and lots of footnotes, and it'll take a while, and everybody's wanting to be great. But this is our prototype cover. Another thing that I'm involved with a group called the Books for Healing Partnership, and we do basically information books. This one was done for the Greenville Shriners Hospital, where, it's primarily an orthopedic hospital. And this is a story about a little bear who couldn't climb trees because she had scoliosis. And we wrote the story and had it illustrated, but in the back of the book, it talks about what services Greenville does, the process for going through, and they were printed by the hospital and distributed through their clinics throughout the Southeast. And we've already reprinted 2 or 3 times. It's a great book. In another situation, this one I think was for Sarah Prognostics, in which we get a sponsorship similar in that there's a children's story. This is about preterm birth, and Sarah Prognostics actually has a blood test that they can do to find out if you have a high probability of having a premature child. And this was, all children's book with information in the back so that we have an opportunity to get people to read, more than once instead of like discharge papers and that sort of thing.
Right.
This is one I'm working on right now, which is a book for parents of neurodivergent children. And you can see where you go from simple to as far as the cover design. This is another one I'm in the middle of working on. And then this is a history of the Georgia to Georgia relationship of the YMCA from 1992 to today, as sister cities from Atlanta, Georgia to Tbilisi. Um, Here's a family memoir in hardcover. And then, of course, there's yours.
Let's just talk a little bit about that as an example for a couple of reasons. One is that I thank Valley again for the fact that I had this idea. I wanted to put this out for my 75th birthday. And I was going to go with a larger size book. What traditional size book is, Valley? What size?
I think we ended up with 5x8.
We did, but ordinarily books are what size?
The standards are 5.5 by 8.5 or 6x9.
Right. And you
Okay.
convinced me, and I'm so glad you did, that to go to this size, which is a perfect size, whereas the other you explained to me, it would have been okay, but would have dwarfed some of the stuff in it. So, that, I guess you help on that, the size of the book, you can make a determination.
Right. I'll talk to people, and generally when people come and they've got 200-page book, I'm going to go with 6x9 these days. If it's going to be a hardcover, we may go larger. 5.5 by 8.5 became sort of the known. You knew it was self-published, and that harkens back to the day when the nose was up over, you self-published it as opposed to not going through a traditional one. But 6x9 and 5.5 by 8.5 fit on a bookstore shelf. I mean, that's normally the thing. But for your project, because I don't think you were that interested in putting it on a bookstore shelf,
Right, yeah.
and because there's one quote per page, I wanted it to be a little bit smaller so that people could stick it in a purse or and it feels a little cozier that way.
And by the way, just again, a compliment to you, it just came out perfectly. And, everybody's seen it, loves it. I love it. And I should mention that if anybody's watching or listening to the show, if they made a contribution and the quote's in the book, they'll be getting a copy. Also, I'll be giving out at my 75th birthday party. So that'll be coming up. And in addition, you could also find it on Amazon, the website. You'll find the book. You can buy it directly there or get in touch with me through BLAINESWORLD.net or bginbc@aol.com. It's just kind of a fun book that I put together. But again, thanks to Valley, you really made it easy, Valley. And that's a compliment, because some people, I guess, if they look to do this themselves, might think it's a very complicated project, and it can be unless you're guiding us through the process. So again, I thank you for really making it simple. And I guess, do other people tell you it's relatively easy working with you on that?
Yeah, for the most part. No, and I say that because most people who come have an idea of what they want it to be and to look like, but no idea at all about how to get it there. To some degree, Amazon and any of the ones that say, okay, upload my Word file, and and there are all kinds of technical problems and issues that happen that I know will happen, and they get frustrated and they don't know, and do I need an ISBN and do all the rest of that. And again, it's my goal, particularly on a project. I'm looking at all the bits and pieces. I'm saying, okay, who is going to read this book? If I'm editing as how is that going to be read by the people that you expect to read your book? I'm looking at cover design. I'm looking at everything. I want your book to do as well as it possibly can, and I want it to look like it was published by Simon and Schuster. And I have the wherewithal to do that, and I know what questions to ask, and I know how to make it look that way. And generally speaking, I know about just about every facet of the book publishing and the book editing world. And if I don't, then I know where to go and find out about it.
And talk about, yeah. And in terms of that, talk about two last things, Valley. You mentioned also, some folks may not be familiar with it, but you mentioned the ISBN number. And what's that all about?
ISBN, first of all, stands for International Standard Book Number. Okay. And it's really kind of a part number. People often get copyright and ISBN confused, and they really don't have anything to do with each other. An ISBN number is like a SKU number. You go on Amazon, you buy a pair of shoes, there's something, something R, if they're red, and something, something B, if they're blue. And it literally differentiates between even different formats. For instance, a paperback book will have one ISBN, a hardcover book of the same text will have another ISBN, and it's unique in the world. It's completely unique. If you're publishing a book for a family memoir, you don't really need one. But if you have any idea of wanting to commercially sell or even have an opportunity to do that in the future, you need one. I buy them as a block of 100 every few years so that I can assign them from my block. Or I think you can buy them for $125 from the ISBN agency, or you can buy a block of 10 for 300. And sometimes I tell people to buy a block of 10, especially if they already know that they're going to publish. They've got a whole bunch and their ideas are going to publish a few more because it's obviously cheaper than $125 each. But most people don't know whether they need one or not, and it's not there. Copyright is a different thing. That is, you own the words that are in your book forever. You don't have to register it just by putting it on that second page. Is usually pretty good for protecting you. The only situation in which it may not is if you expect someone to challenge you or there's plagiarism. You can register with the Library of Congress for the copyright. That takes a little bit longer than you want, but the ISBN is just a part number.
And again, I want to thank you for the fact that that's something else, a service you provided, that you took care of the ISBN number, you took care of the copyright. And what a pleasure. I should mention one other thing that you were the best on, and that is the fact that after you publish a book or get it in final form, sometimes, and I won't mention any folks who do this, but sometimes they want to change after everything's all done, and talk about that process in terms of, it's relatively simple, I guess, working through you or you self-publish it yourself, but that's the beauty of it. You can change stuff, within 2 or 3 days? How long does it take?
Right. Well, it depends on how much of a change you're talking about. But I keep, let me just say, especially if I've been involved in editing and proofreading, I have never yet had a book go to print that we didn't get it and open it up. And, I describe the process of the error jumps up and slaps you in the face. Okay. The good news is I have as I said, I use Adobe InDesign. I have the file and I keep it there. And a part of the process with most books is that we go through, I do the layout, we get it there, I send you a PDF of what is going to be there, and you have a certain amount of time to go through, to pour over it and find, I've had people say, let's drop that chapter. Well, of course, that affects the number of pages, and there are some things that, kind of chipped and stone. But by and large, it only takes me, a few hours to go in and make the corrections or changes that we need to make. And the beauty of again, Amazon and also with Ingram Spark, which supplies the bookstores, And I recommend usually that you have an account with each. But if you have published the book on Amazon and you go, oh, wait a minute. And I think that you had one of those situations where there was a quote you meant to put
Right.
in, and then we replaced it, but we had already uploaded it to Amazon. Fortunately, as long as you keep it the same number of pages and you're not changing a lot of other things, you can export a new file after the corrections are made, upload it, and it's available within about 3 hours of the upload.
And you should have mentioned that, Vally, because now I think I told you before you started taping that there was one mistake I found. It was my error.
We can fix it.
I will do it. And I should mention one last thing back to Vally, that she not only designed the cover, which I love, but she also designed the back cover. And you get to see me and our amazing cat Kismet and my beautiful bride Cynthia. But just I love it. You know, and just of all the things you do, is the cover thing, do you enjoy doing that the most, or is that one of the fun things you like doing?
I really enjoy, all facets of that, but the cover I like because I try to make it um, fit the mood of what's inside. Okay. And a lot of times, people come to me and they've got an idea of what they want. I have one author whose granddaughter painted and she wanted that on the cover. It's not what I would have done. But again, that's another thing. I'm not going to tell you, no, I don't think that's a good idea unless I know for some reason the printer is there. But I enjoy thinking about choosing a photograph um, or a painting or something that kind of fits what's inside.
Okay, I think you do a great job on it. So again, thank you. And one last time, Valley Sharpe, if any folks are watching or listening to this and want to get in touch with you about discussing a book publishing idea or having their own stuff published, you've already heard me say on air that strongly recommend working with you, Valley, but how do they get in touch with you again?
You can call me at 828-505-1037, or you can send me an email through the contact page in my website, which is www.uwpnew.com.
Okay, and I want to thank you for being my guest on this edition of Blaine's World webcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti. Hopefully, at some point in time, Valley will actually see each other in person.
Hopefully so.
Okay, great.
Thank
Thanks
you.
again.